based on the things I've done in these three former roles, here are the three things that I learned, and here's how it applies to product management.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dante Alvarado-Leon, and I'm a product manager. My mission is to share practical advice to help you enter and thrive in the tech industry. Today, I have an exceptional guest for all of you, a mentor and friend of mine, Alberto Avalos-Cervantes. He's a product manager at WePay, a fintech company, worked previously as a software engineer and in the nonprofit and civic engagement sectors for a few years as well. As you can see, Alberto brings a wealth of knowledge to us today, and I'm very excited for you all to get to learn from him. So stay tuned till the end of the show. Let's welcome Alberto. How are you doing today?
Hi, Dante. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Great to be with you today.
Why don't we kick off our conversation today, Alberto, by you telling us a bit more about yourself and your journey into product management?
Sure. I'm originally from the LA area. I was born in the east side of Los Angeles, specifically Boyle Heights, raised in the city of Southgate. Currently, as you mentioned, I'm a product manager at WePay, which is a financial technology company that was acquired by JP Morgan Chase. Right before that, I had the honor of being a software engineer with the hometown team, the LA Dodgers, go Dodgers. And then prior to that, I actually had a number of different experiences from, the campaign space, specifically political campaigns. I moved into the nonprofit educational technology space, and then I moved into specifically policy around civic engagement. And so really the journey has been quite an interesting one. Definitely not a linear path, if you will, but all along that journey, I've had the great opportunity to meet amazing people who've helped provide me an amazing path and point me in the right direction, if you will, to develop key skill sets that have made me successful to becoming a product manager today.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's really interesting to see how you went from, working in campaigns to now working at a fintech company. So I'm curious to know more about how did you specifically break into product management?
To be quite frank, I never even knew what product management was growing up. I didn't know about it in high school. Really, the only entrance to technology, the only introduction to technology in high school was, typing class or AP computer science. And so it wasn't really a journey, if you will, to well equip me before going into college, to equip me with the right skill sets to be successful in technology. But what I always knew was I need to make sure that I'm working with great people and focusing on skill sets rather than the role. So, I mentioned I first started on political campaigns, and I then moved into policy for civic engagement. But at the core of that was understanding voters. And, you can sort of compare that to understanding users, right? And my key thing, the key concept that I was focused on was, how do I best understand voters, and how do I develop policy or write policy to make sure that they're engaged within the civic process? How do I identify the barriers, the different pain points, if you will, and begin to develop policy against that, right? I moved into the educational technology space because, as I mentioned, growing up, I didn't necessarily have the resources or the opportunities available to explore careers in technology, right? And so for me, it was important to, how can I develop a program specifically for my community, primarily Latino and Latina youth, around equipping them with the right skill set to enter the technology space. And so I created a program where I'm originally from, in the east side of LA in Boyle Heights, called Code as a Second Language. And the primary focus of that, Dante, was essentially, how do we introduce Latino and Latina youth to computer science as early as possible? And how do we follow them and provide them the skill sets that they need to be successful within a career in software engineering? I did that for a number of years. We ended up growing the program from just Boyle Heights to over 70 different markets in the US, over 100 plus schools, and it's still going today. It's definitely one of the things that I'm most proud of and that I continue to support today. When I ended up deciding to transition away from the Hispanic Heritage Foundation, which was the organization that I was with, leading that coding program, I said, you know what, I'm going to go all in, practice what I've been preaching around computer science, and dive straight into a boot camp to learn software engineering myself, right? End to end. I had gotten a number of introduction over the course of 6 years, but I wanted to do it. I wanted to go all in. And so I joined one of the top programs in the country called Sabio.la. And that was, a whirlwind. Probably one of the hardest things that I've ever done personally, but it really provided a great skill set that I felt like I'd been wanting, a technical skill set to build technology, right? And so when I did that, had amazing opportunities immediately after the boot camp to work at a couple of startups, and then ended up getting an opportunity to join again the hometown team, the LA Dodgers. Essentially, I joined in September in 2020. They won the World Series in October 2020. So I like to say maybe I was the missing piece after 32 years. I was
There you go.
MVP, most valuable programmer, right? So
Yes.
it was a great opportunity to have been there. Did that for some time, and then realized, what, instead of being sort of at the tail end of requirements or products, if you will, I wanted to be on the front end, essentially being able to sort of inform and shaping what a product looks like. And so, I'll pause there. That's really been sort of an interesting journey that's definitely not linear. So if you take one thing away from what I just mentioned is, regardless of where you are today, if you want to get into product management, learn those key skill sets along the way that is going to help equip you for that.
That's an amazing journey, Alberto. Thank you so much for walking us through that. One thing that has stood out for me, you mentioned that it's important to focus on skill set rather than on roles or titles. And you did just that throughout your whole journey, right? Going from campaigns to working in the EdTech sector, all the way now to becoming a fintech product manager. I would like to double click on the following. What technical skills would you say are most helpful to learn to become an effective product manager?
Sure. It's a good question. And I think it's a theme that I see online a lot around a question of, do I need to be an engineer before I'm a product manager? And, in short, to me personally, the answer is no. But there are some key technical aspects or key technical skill sets that would be helpful to learn. Right. And so if I had to think of a couple of them, first I would say understand APIs. APIs, which are application program interfaces, essentially the way that two software programs speak to each other. And so understanding APIs is very much a critical aspect of understanding technology and how it operates today. So that's one thing. And then two, the one interesting thing that I learned in the program that I did with Sabio, and probably has really been sort of eye-opening, and when I speak to many other engineers, it's also still kind of a question mark as to how it really happens. And that's the request response lifecycle. Understanding how a request gets from a client, such as your phone, all the way to a server, and what response you get back, and all of the inner workings in between. Because when you can understand how a request makes its way across the internet and then back to your device of choice, that really understanding the inner workings of that would provide a very clear view as to how technology is working. So those are two things I would recommend: understanding the request response lifecycle and understanding APIs at a base level.
No, that's great. And we may even do a video on it at some point later in the road. But you're right. Learning about any specific technology that you're interested in. It could also be artificial intelligence, right? It could be whatever that technology is for you, blockchain, right? And diving deeper, in this case, since you are working at an API first company, it makes sense to learn more about APIs and the request and response lifecycle. So yeah, no, that's very, very insightful. One thing you mentioned is you did a coding bootcamp. And so for folks who may be listening and are interested in doing a bootcamp, what advice do you have from them? I know it's a really big decision. You mentioned it's one of the hardest things you've done in your life. Any questions that you ask yourself before deciding to do the bootcamp?
Sure. The primary question for me was when I was evaluating different options in coding bootcamps, and today there's so many, right? For me, at the core of what was important was from evaluating a bootcamp was what was their investment in me, right? What if I was not successful, what were the implications for the bootcamp itself, right? What were the implications for that program, right? And so if I was just going to be another sort of drop in the bucket and, hey, you know what, that person didn't make it, too bad, so sad, I didn't necessarily feel that was the right fit for me. I wanted a program that was going to be invested in me because I was going to invest in the program, both, financially and just with my time, a fair amount of time. And so that's the key thing. Make sure you're looking for programs that you can that are going to invest in you as a person, and making sure that you're successful, right? The other thing that I would say is if you're even evaluating this route, and I'm usually very direct with this with anyone who asks, is make sure you're all in, right? Because this, again, if you haven't had experience within software engineering before and you choose to go down this route and go into a program that's very intense, you have to make sure you're all in, right? And that it becomes challenges both personally and professionally. I had to personally leave my former role to do this for the course of 3 months. And, while the programs were, come in 8 o'clock, leave by, 7, 8 p.m., for me, I knew I was all in, my back against the wall, that I had to make this work. So I would show up at 7 a.m., leave close to midnight, go home, sleep, wake up, and do that 7 days a week, right? And so making sure that I was fully invested to make sure that I can learn the skill sets, but also begin to develop relationships that after the program would pay dividends, that was critical for me. And so again, if any advice I give to anyone is one, make sure you evaluate these programs very, very well. Talk to a lot of alumni of a program that you're interested in. And then two, make sure that you can make the full-on commitment to dedicate a significant portion of your life to these programs.
Awesome. No, that's really insightful. And I know I'm speaking to a product manager because the way you approach it is you're starting with the user, you're starting backwards, right? It's like, what is this program? How is that going to benefit me? How's it going to help me reach my next goal, whatever that goal is that you're thinking of? And then, like you mentioned, do lots of research and make sure you're fully invested in, just like product managers are. We're fully invested in making the experience better for our customers. So that's great. Thank you for sharing that. Now, a question that I've gotten is, do you recommend folks do a coding bootcamp or a product certificate to become a product manager? Why or why not?
For me, a coding program, I think if you're all in on product management, don't just go do a coding bootcamp to learn a few skill sets, because again, it's an investment financially, and it's a significant amount of investment to your time. So I would recommend folks do a coding program or coding bootcamp if they want to be a software engineer, right? If they want to do product management, what I would say is, sure, a product certificate is certainly helpful, no doubt. But again, for me, it's when you're considering these type of programs, even from a product perspective, look for really, again, a strong cohort, applied learning, and holistic content, right? Because you want to make sure that the people you're not just learning content, but the people you're learning with is very, very important. Two, that the learning that you're actually learning is not just reading books or reading content or anything of that sort, but you're actually getting a chance to apply it during that program. And then lastly, holistic content, end to end, really looking at from identifying product opportunities to prototyping to actually creating a release plan, right? I think those are the programs that provide sort of a very strong view and a really strong sort of skill set, help you build the skill set within product management. So that's kind of my feedback. But again, even if you go the product management route, learning some technical skills is certainly going to be helpful. Do you need to do a whole coding bootcamp? I don't think so. There's enough resources online. I know Itzel, part of the channel, she provides amazing resources for software engineers. So I think that's something to definitely explore as well.
Yeah, shout out to Itzel for her software engineering videos. And Alberto actually wrote a great post and reflection on his experience going through a product management certificate program. So we'll link it down below for folks to check it out in case you're interested. You nailed it. I think you just gave us really good evaluation criteria when thinking about either if I want to go the coding bootcamp route to become a software engineer, or if I want to become a product manager, what should I think about in these courses and programs that are offered nowadays? So I want to dive a little bit deeper into a decision that you made in your career, which was leaving the software engineering world to becoming a product manager. I'm curious, why did you decide to move from software engineering into product management? And how did you go about making that decision? This will be helpful to our listeners who are developers and are interested in becoming product managers one day.
It's a good question, and it's something that I kind of had thought a lot about. I'm doing product management today. I have the title today, right? But there's things I've done throughout the course of my career that have had aspects of product management. I built a program from scratch to teach kids to code, and went from one neighborhood to over 70 cities in the US, right? And so that in and of itself is a product. We got grants from multiple companies, including Google and Salesforce and General Motors, all across the board, right? And so understanding that, okay, who was our customer at that point? And now that I reflect, I can look at it from a product management lens specifically and recognize that I was really doing a lot of product management sort of items, if you will, during that experience, right? And so when I moved into software engineering, again, there was those aspects of product management in my experiences. So for all you developers out there who are watching this, considering going into product management, you may notice that, hey, you don't really have a full-on product management team you work with, right? And that was my experience. I didn't have a full on the other side of the table, a product manager at all times. I kind of had to understand the product, understand the customers, and develop against that based on my findings or my assumptions or my research. Right. So a lot of you developers are kind of doing some product management, playing somewhat of a product management role in some of your experiences today. So for you developers who are considering going into it, I would say definitely it's an amazing opportunity. And the key thing to do if you're developing today is understand why you're building what you're doing, right? And put it on the product managers to make that case so you can fully understand it. Try to get involved in those conversations of understanding the users, understanding the business case, understanding the product at a core level, as opposed to just, coding against requirements. So it's that taking the next step to really understand why you're building what you're building.
That's golden right there. What I've read and what I've learned in my career so far is product managers are really the owners of the why and the what, right? And then the engineers earn the how. So if you're an engineer, just like Alberto put it, make sure you ask those questions to your product manager or to your product team and say, hey, why are we doing this? What is it that we're doing and how are we adding value to the business? So now that we learned about making decisions going from software engineering to product management, let's take it a step further, Alberto. There's a lot of folks today that are currently prepping for interviews. So could you share more about your process to prepare for product management interviews?
Sure. The folks who know me know that I go all in whatever I do, right? So whether it be the actual work that I'm doing or whether it's preparing for an opportunity, right? And so if you're preparing, if you even have a sense that you want to prepare for product interviews, go all in. Again, make sure that you're preparing yourself well. If you're going to do anything, do it very well, right? And so make sure that you're committing a specific amount of time to preparing for these interviews. And for me, what helped in particular was write out responses, right? Think about, there's an endless amount of resources online that give you example product questions, example product exercises, right? Work on those yourself. Work with other product managers to do mock interviews. But what I have found very particularly interesting was doing it with non-product managers, to extent some family members who have no idea what I'm preparing for, but they entertain my question about, helping me to do it, because I want to make sure that I can communicate in plain English to someone who has no idea about what I'm working on. That is a key skill set, communication. And so that's how you can practice one of the key aspects of product management, which is communication, is including people in your interview preparation that don't necessarily have a product background or have no idea what you're doing. So, go all in, make sure that you're writing down your responses and preparing for them. 2, doing mock interviews. And 3, get out there and interview. Right? Don't just wait until, until we get in this constant cycle of I'm not ready yet. But you're never gonna know if you're ready if you don't try, right? And so for me, I'm a big believer on go out there, put yourself out there. It's gonna be uncomfortable. You're gonna get kind of punched in the gut and get a number of no's or anything of that sort. But that's okay. That's how you're gonna learn where your areas of opportunity are. So make sure you go out and do that as you prepare in your interviews.
100%. Practice, practice, practice. And you have to kind of be interviewing before you actually go and do the actual PM interview. So thank you for that advice, Alberto. Now, I want to look back, becoming a product manager takes time, takes patience, and it's not easy. So I would like to hear from you, what was the most challenging aspect for you in landing that first role?
Sure. For me, probably the most challenging part, Dante, was framing my experiences that I've had in the past, where they didn't necessarily have the product manager title, right? And so, technology is not the only industry where framing your experience is important, or the challenge, or where folks sort of do the first nod, looking through your resume. Have they done this before? Am I looking for a specific title? Am I looking for a specific degree? So the biggest challenge for me, and I know for many, and for many of the viewers of your channel, is how do I communicate that I've built the right skill sets that I know I can be successful in this type of role, right? And so for me, what helped, and for all the folks looking at this, is take a very deep look at your previous experiences and go in there, kind of go in there and try to call out and try to note what are all the different things that I did, or the skill sets that made me successful in this role that are also applicable within product management, right? And there you can start putting together your narrative around okay, based on the things I've done in these three former roles, here are the three things that I learned, and here's how it applies to product management, right? So going through that exercise was extremely helpful for me, who didn't necessarily have a product manager title before, but I knew that I had the skill sets to be successful as one, right? So for me, the biggest challenge, to your point, was, the person across, across the room or across the Zoom these days, right? Understanding that, maybe I don't have that title, but let me share how I know I can add value to your team, right? So that was the biggest challenge, framing my previous experiences when I didn't necessarily have that product manager role.
Yeah, you just gave us an example earlier on about how you translated the experience scaling and launching a program, helping students in your community learning computer science. And now to this day, it's a program that's scaled nationwide, right? And that's really understanding the pain points of your users. Same thing you did with your campaign experience, right? Really understanding why people are not going out there and voting. So as long as you're always reframing your experience and how you're going to add value to a specific company or opportunity, that's how you can set yourself apart and land that first PM role. Alberto, to wrap up our conversation today, would you like to share any final words of wisdom, inspiration, and advice for folks looking to become product managers one day?
Yeah, for all the folks that are looking to become product managers, if I had any sort of key takeaway, is just start today. For us, I think it's always about thinking about, okay, maybe I'll start next week, or hey, maybe when I do this course, or maybe when I read this book, maybe when I meet this one person. It's start today. Incremental steps are going to get you there faster than waiting for that one key sign that now is your time, right? So that's one thing. Start today. Two is make sure you're building relationships with great people. You don't necessarily have to aim for the top and start looking for folks who are very, very senior in their careers. Talk with other product managers in general. For me, I've always found a lot of value in building with each other and understanding each other's roles, and understanding each other's sort of perspective as it comes to product development, because there's a lot of nuances based on the industry, based on the scope of that product manager. So that's two. And then three, anything you learn, make sure that you're sharing it with others. I'm a big fan of Dante and Itzel for what they do, what they share, because at the end of the day, they don't necessarily have to share all of this with the world, or create a platform to share their learnings, but they do it. And I think that's what personally is motivating to me, that anything I learn, I want to make sure that I can go back, to 12-year-old me and show those folks who are also young about these opportunities and these skill sets, right? Because bringing others with you, together we're going to move faster than individually. And so I'm a keen believer that anything you learn, make sure that you're bringing others with you and sharing that knowledge as well.
Love it. That was very, very insightful. Thank you so much, Alberto, right? It's all about paying it forward. It's about giving it your best and jumping right into it. Hey, Alberto, so where can folks connect with you?
Sure. Folks can find me on LinkedIn as Alberto Avalos-Cervantes. Happy to connect with anyone.
I'll make sure to link down in the description of this video Alberto's LinkedIn URL, so make sure to connect with him. As always, thank you, Alberto. Have learned so much from you today, and I really appreciate you joining us. This has been amazing. And thanks to everyone who tuned in to watch this show. Let us know in the comments down below what were your key takeaways from our conversation with Alberto. And I would like to hear any feedback that you have on this new format of interviewing product managers. We'll see you on the next video.